The Leap Sheep Startup Builder Live Q&A. This is the place for startup founders to ask their burning questions that are keeping them up at night. Learn from our guest founders and startup support experts, and of course, Leap Sheep's own startup building experts who have worked with hundreds of founders and their teams. Welcome, I'm your host today, Kirk Drage. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Leap Sheep. At Leap Sheep, we're on a mission to flip the 95% startup failure rate by making expert personalized startup building guidance accessible, affordable for all founders around the world. Welcome to the founders that have joined today live. It's great to have you here. The show is all about supporting you to get from idea to a business model hypothesis that can get to product market fit and then validate that it actually can before scaling up so that you can avoid that 95% failure rate. Thanks to founders who have sent in questions before the show. If you're live online now, please drop any questions into the YouTube comments or the LinkedIn comments as we go, and we'll pick up your questions along the way. Today, I'm really excited to have a fabulous guest, Alex McConville, with us. Alex is a seasoned leader, coach, mentor with over 30 years experience in helping businesses scale, drive revenue, and build strong collaborative cultures. With a background spanning multinational corporations, SMEs, startups, he specializes in strategic planning, sales, marketing, and business development. As a startup success manager at Stone & Chalk, he connects founders with the right people, resources, and opportunities to help accelerate their growth. He works closely with businesses to navigate their challenges, to foster meaningful relationships and ensure they maximize the support available to them. His mission is to help startups gain clarity, reduce complexity, and stay on the path to success. Alex, it's absolutely fabulous to have you here today. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Kirk. It's great to be here.
Let's dive right in. You've been in this space for a long time. Tell us a little bit about your journey. How did you first get involved in startups? Because, you know, as we've talked about before, startups are a very, very particular type of business, and often things that cause startups to get unstuck is confusing support that comes from the established business world or what I call the regular entrepreneurship world. But startups are very different. Give us a bit of an insight into how you got involved in startups, specifically in your journey.
Yeah, sure. Look, startups. Look, I've always been entrepreneurial. Even at school, I remember taking on the canteen. My parents had a corporate card to be able to get sort of wholesale prices on snacks, and I saw an opportunity there. And
For an arbitrage opportunity.
Yeah, that's right. So I think I was probably about 12 or 13 at the time. Set up my own little one down the end of the playing fields, and that was interesting. Taught me a lot even then, just trying to
You weren't
understand.
competing with the actual school canteen, were you?
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah, I
you were.
was. They had a tuck shop, so so I was able to understand about differentiation. I remember the Mars bar. They had this supersized Mars bar, which I needed to get. And it was only slightly more expensive. I was selling them the canteen's regular.
Yeah.
And then just personality and networking, I was able to get a bit of money coming in. It was only a few
Fabulous.
pounds at the time in England, but look, innovation. I mean, I think that's just sort of entrepreneurship has always been part of my core, and just trying to look at opportunities. My journey has taken me, it's been quite diverse. And again, just looking at opportunities. I ended up in South America for 6 years, and there were opportunities present there. I ended up starting a hostel. I had a bar and a nightclub and a restaurant, and just sort of capitalized on opportunities. Um, Again, in Eastern Europe, when the EU was forming. There was an opportunity there to try and invest as countries were trying to join the EU, and I invested into Slovenia and bought a property there, and had an adventure travel company from the UK to Slovenia.
Fascinating.
So I think the space is exciting, because it's untapped potential. It's what I love about startups is that the sky is the limit. You know, if you know, there's pros and cons obviously to everything you do, but when you start a startup, it's the unknown. You can literally take over the world with your startup. So I find that extremely exciting. And in Australia, had a couple of startups, been part of a couple of tech startups. Myself, I was co-founder on a couple of startups in the tech business before COVID hit, and flattened that. And then joined another startup, environmental sort of impact, climate analytics startup, which was exciting because we took that from about 1.8 to 9 million whilst I was there as global head of sales, and we actually went through Stone & Chalk and scaled out.
Oh, fabulous.
So look, it's great being in and out of this. And now being part of Stone Chook and being able to help others in that journey. Having been through that journey, it is brutal, and I understand how hard it is. But it's also so exciting, and just to see the passion and the dreams and the realization of those,
Yeah.
yeah, gives me a lot of
There's
satisfaction.
there's some interesting themes there to draw on. One is your global perspective. I find that really helps inform your vision of what's possible and who can be helped. Um, can you talk a little bit about how that sort of shaped your worldview, having that experience in different parts of the world?
Yeah, look, I think that's a really good question because, for example, I spent 6 years in South America and running businesses in South America. One of the things I think one of my strengths is communication. I'm a communicator. I enjoy communication, the human sort of part of that, and so I really made an effort to communicate in the language, learn the language.
All right.
It
Yeah.
wasn't through schooling or structured way. It was just by talking and trying to be seen as a local, not as a
Yeah.
gringo.
Yeah. Right.
And as you develop that language, you develop the mind. You can actually think in that language, which is really quite an eye opener because different cultures and different languages think in a different way because the words that they use enables them to have different perspectives and thoughts. So things operate very differently in different countries. South
Yeah.
America, it's all about family. It's all about connections and who you know and trust. But it doesn't follow the normal, what we would expect. If you turn up to a meeting, you expect the meeting to start on time. If
Yeah.
that person you're meeting has had a family member turn up or somebody else, that they are ahead in the priority list. Doesn't matter who you are. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's where you get the manana. It's fine. It can happen manana.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Fascinating. The other theme there to draw on, apart from that international, is I would sort of call you a bit of a generalist because you've got such a breadth of experience across many things, and I think that's a superpower of many startup founders, is because you have such a small team when you're starting, but the workload is not necessarily small. You still have to have a marketing department and a sales department and a delivery department and a finance department, and on and on and on. Just because you're not a corporate yet, you actually still need to do many of the things that corporates do. So how do you think that diversity of experience has shaped you?
Yeah, that's yeah. Again, that's really interesting. Looking back at my sort of history, it's it's like what do you do? What is your career? I've never really had a career. I've just sort of I've been opportunistic and developed skills and thought, oh, if I'd focused more, but in my youth, I might have developed a career. But in the
Yeah,
end, it's given me that broad outlook. And I think for startups, certainly when you're a founder or when you're getting those initial hires, you need someone that is a generalist that is able to multitask across a broad sort of range of disciplines.
yeah,
A lot of founders, I think, fall potentially into a pit early on of hiring someone. Look, we need someone for sales. You
yeah,
have someone that's very potentially experienced and excellent in that field, but falls over because they need to do a whole heap of other things that they
yeah,
just are not comfortable doing and haven't got the skills or capacity.
yeah. So yes, such an important point. It's such a common point of failure for startups, specializing too early, and teaching people to be generalists and better generalists is the first sort of hump you need to get over before you can get the critical mass to hire those specialists. The last thing I wanted to draw on there, you've given me a lot to work with, is I see this trend with founders that have come from a background of retail or hospitality, where those industries, you're very much customer centric, and you understand about service and providing great outcomes for customers. Very different than if you come from, say, an engineering or a science background, and you have more of a back of house kind of mindset. How do you think that service mindset has sort of helped you on your journey?
Yeah, like I think I can see that now when I speak to different founders from different backgrounds, and you have these highly technical, brilliant founders that really understand the problem and the solution, but it's having the sort of hospitality. It's all about people in the end.
Yeah,
I think founders and businesses, even big businesses, they get very focused on the numbers and forget about the people. And in the end, whatever product you have, however technical it is, it's humans that you're trying to help alleviate a problem with that piece of technology. So I think having that service background and being able to engage with humans and understand humans and communicate with them is incredibly important for any business.
Yeah, 100%. I was speaking to a great sales coach the other day, Matthew Wyatt, that says, some people tell me they're a B2B business or a B2C business or a G2B business or whatever. And I say, no, every business is a H to H. It's human to human. And I think that's a really good grounded way of looking at things.
100%. That's it.
So you spent time in different kinds of businesses. So I started off talking about how startups are very unique types of businesses where you're not only building a new business, you're building a new kind of business, which is very different to sort of building a bar that you've built versus a tech startup, because usually every tech startup is unique. You've also had some corporate experience. Can you share with us the mindset change that you need in the tech startup versus some of those other businesses, whether it's a corporate or whether it's those small business ventures that you've had experience in? How does the mindset change, particularly for tech startup founders?
Yeah, look, I think it is very different for tech startup founders. Often they understand the problem, but they're having to educate others that what the problem is sometimes before, and the fact that they've got a solution to the problem that people may not be aware of. If they are aware of it, then it's trying to help those shift their potential customers' mindsets to the value of that solution, because they'll have a traditional mindset of business and where the money is traditionally sort of filtered throughout the business. So it's a really difficult position for a technological startup to get into the world of convincing people they have a solution to a problem that they need, and then to try and, again, if it's very unique, to try and build that journey and the vision of what this implementation will look like and how much it will save in the future. Because I think it's very human nature to solve the problems now. It's we're trying to meet our needs. So coming from just trying to survive. You're trying to put food on the table. You're trying to solve problems that are causing you discomfort now. To try and then think about a solution that may solve a problem in a year, 2 years, 5 years. It is very difficult to shift that mindset. Big corporate, they're chugging along, so they're very well set in their ways, and it's more about ROI and churns and the numbers, and the accountants can pull the levers to make sure that the business is operating. So it's like steering a small dinghy comparing to the QE2. It's a corporate, you can shift tiny increments, and it's never going to move much, but it's going to be consistent and reliable. Whereas a startup, you're incredibly agile, but the waters might be very choppy, and you're bumping around and trying to steer to calmer waters. So I think I hope that analogy helped.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely makes sense, and I think very true. Just picking up on the first part of what you said there, I think it's really important to sort of call that out. And I find that a lot of founders intuitively know, but don't have the language to talk about it. And Steve Blank talks about this a lot, that many startup founders are not only creating new products, but new product categories. And when you're creating an entirely new category of product, all the ecosystem that sits around a product, like you think about a product like a car, for example, you think about the ecosystem that sits around that. There's car dealers, and there's places to go to learn to drive, and there's car parks, and there's car washes, and auto parts stores, and the list goes on and on and on. And many products have that ecosystem around them. And so that's one thing you don't have if you're creating a brand new product category, is that entire ecosystem, and you may need to build parts of that to make your product successful, which often changes your go-to-market strategy and how you need to approach things. You certainly want your investors to be aware of that, because that sets the right kind of expectations. As you quite rightly said, if customers didn't think a solution was possible, they probably don't think about the problem very hard, because they've just sort of written the problem off as much as, well, we just have to accept that things are the way they are, and we just sort of work with it. And as a founder, you're coming along and go, no, we can now solve this problem. You have to tell me more about the problem. But the customer doesn't even have a language to really tell you about their problem, because they haven't thought a lot about it. And so that takes a long time to learn that language and sort of pull that out of people. And then you've got to build a language for talking about the solution once you figured out the problem language. So I think that's a fascinating insight that you bring up there. That's so important for founders to sort of know: are they building a new product category, or are they competing in an existing product category? That's that Steve Blank new markets thing. And on the corporate front, I think you also pick up on some great points there. That corporates are looking for stability, and they're looking for predictability and reliability and specialization. Very, very different mindset, as you said, to founders who are experimenting, trying different things, expecting things to fail after an experiment's run, and move on to the next experiment. So it can look like you're a startup founder without a plan, but you've got a very clear plan. It's just that experiments fail, and that's okay. And as long as people understand your vision, where you're going, and you're focused, you can explain away all the experiments that don't work to get you to where you need to go. But a very different mindset from a culture point of view, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And I think on that point, there are some pitfalls around that, building that ecosystem. You have a unique product, and founders are inherently innovative. That's what they do. They innovate. When they find a problem, they want to solve it. And if you've got
Yeah.
a new product, you have to try and build an ecosystem around it. You often see founders, the company sort of moves forward and then halts because it starts going sideways, because you start trying to innovate and create
Too
this
much.
ecosystem, and then you've suddenly got like 20 things going on tangentially,
Yeah.
and no way forward. So yeah, it's so many challenges, but still so exciting.
Great segue into my next question, which is about complexity. We were talking about this earlier, how startups very quickly have to deal with this mushrooming amount of complexity, as you were just outlining. What's been your experience in helping founders navigate that, and your own experience in navigating that?
Yeah, look, I see it again and again, that complexity piece, and sort of just creating chaos as you continue to innovate and find new problems, and yes, go by. The pressure is, the hours you're piling on, and you keep stretching yourself or the workforce. Um, I think it's really important to put a break on. You really need to try and, I mean, look, you need to continuously refine your core value proposition, and actually have a look at what you're doing and why you're doing it, and what the trajectory is you're on. Um, and I'll ask founders about what's their value proposition, what is their vision and mission, and what are they doing? Does that align with that? And you often find, because it's quite reactive and it's incredibly busy, that they're just head down, just trying to get through the day to keep up with all the additional complexity that they've created in their world.
Yeah.
Um, so really putting that break on and just going, look, I advise people to take a day, step back, pull your co-founders in, have a look at everything that's out there, and really try and map out where you're heading. And if you're not heading anywhere, then you need to see what needs to drop to push the dial forward again.
Yeah, 100%. And look, I know you've got your own coaching business and you coach founders, and we obviously do the same. So I suspect we're probably pretty aligned here, but it is very hard when you're in the weeds trying to get things done, to get that perspective. Can you talk a little bit about how talking to somebody that's outside your business is perhaps going to help you solve some of those problems that you just may not be able to solve yourself, because there's a bit of a conflict, isn't there? An internal conflict when you're trying to both play the role of get stuff done, but also reflect on what I should be doing.
Yeah, look, 100%. I think an external perspective. There's two things there. There's self-awareness, which is difficult. That's difficult. So you often need a different perspective, and also you don't know what you don't know. So to have somebody really just ask you some difficult questions that you just were like, it's funny, you get those light bulb moments when you're in a coaching session with a founder, and they've got this problem. You ask something, and then they just stop in their tracks and go, I hadn't thought of that, and I don't know the answer. And I realized that I really need to know the answer.
Yeah.
So it's a great moment when you get to that in a session, and yeah, so I really encourage founders to just. I think as humans, we often also look. We engage well with like-minded people. So often, when you see another pitfall, founders will hire in their own personality trait, their own type.
Yeah.
So you need to be able to be open enough to be challenged from different personality types and perspectives if you want to be successful. So my biggest advice for founders is open yourself up to constructive criticism. Be challenged every step of the way, because if you don't challenge yourself early on, you may find that you're 2 years down the track, and if you haven't addressed that challenge, it could be worth hundreds of thousands, if not millions.
Yeah, 100%. I remember a quote, I think it was from Sheryl Sandberg at Facebook, talking about our ability to succeed is directly proportional to our ability to take on board difficult conversations.
That's great.
And
Yeah.
I think that's so true, right? The
100%.
more you can go, like, hit me with whatever advice you've got, like, tell me how bad things are, or how poorly I've done, or how I've completely missed something. The more of that insight that you can get quickly, it's going to save you a lot of time and money.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference between, I think great founders who really lean into that and want that advice, as hard as it is, because it's an emotional roller coaster, isn't it? It's not necessarily fun to get some of that
Oh
advice.
no, and it's an emotional. You do have a response that builds because you're trying to protect yourself, and you get
Yeah.
this sort of
You've got a
reaction.
defense mechanism that you build up, right? Yeah. And
Yeah.
you've got a persona that you've got to sort of maintain, that, things are great and things are going well, and I'm optimistic about my business and the market and the potential and everything.
Yeah.
And I guess that's where some of the coaching aspects can come into it, is like how to survive that emotional roller coaster too, isn't it?
Oh, 100%. I think that point you mentioned about drive and enthusiasm. I've seen so many sort of founders, and I'm in awe of, just because of their drive, their belief, and how they can bring everybody along on the journey with incredible enthusiasm and optimism. And
Yeah.
and that's a fantastic trait. That's an essential trait often to get there. But you do need to be challenged offside to really question yourself and break it down. Otherwise, you can just bring everybody into off a cliff.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. The other thing that you mentioned there, which I would describe as the unknown unknowns, it's like helping founders see things that they can't even see. And I think there's a belief in the founder ecosystem globally, that founders have to be self-sufficient and they can figure everything out for themselves. And although we talk about how important teams are, we sort of, I think, put too much pressure on founders to figure everything out themselves and within their team. And a bit of external perspective can start to solve for those unknown unknowns. And I'd love to hear your a bit more perspective on that from you, having coached and worked with a lot of founders there in Stone and Chalk and personally.
Yeah, look, I think that's an interesting point. It is. Look, founders, they don't give up. They're incredibly resilient, and part of that resilient, when they're in a position and they're stuck, they're I've had some business owners sort of speak to me and feel almost embarrassed that they're asking for help that they don't know.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that vulnerability is key to your success. It's like, that shouldn't be a pride thing. It's like,
Yeah.
look at what you've done is incredibly amazing, and where you are is amazing. And the fact that you are open and vulnerable, then it's the right place. And I think you can't do that with potentially your peers or people within the business, because you are leading and you need to be seen as that optimist, that visionary. So it's really important to have somebody outside of the business, such as a coach or a mentor or somebody else, that you can be vulnerable and get validation. You don't want to fall in the trap of validation with people that feel they need to validate you because you are the owner and the CEO. So if you get validation from your own staff, they're often just validating you because they feel that they need to,
Yeah.
or they owe you, or they look up to you. You need somebody that can really be critical, and if you can then get validation from someone that you believe that will be as critical and as open as they will be, then that's the best kind of validation. Then you can just pick yourself up and go right, or you can address issues and adapt.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, it's really challenging. I think what you say about vulnerability, I think it's a real superpower if you can tap into that. I love the Alex Hormozy framework, talking about how do you create dream outcomes for customers and your offers, and thinking about everything you do as a founder as an offer. You're offering customers products and services, but if you're looking for advice from someone, you've got to make an offer to them to say, will you coach me, or will you advise me, or whatever. And part of the value proposition of that offer to them, to make it a no-brainer offer for someone to coach you, is letting people know that you'll be open to that feedback. But it's also letting them know that you feel they're an expert and have got something to give to them. And that status that you're conferring when you ask someone for help and be vulnerable is actually a resource that you have at your disposal that some founders don't tap into. And I think that's really insightful what you say there about that vulnerability.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I agree.
Let's switch gears and talk about founders' favorite topic often, which is capital, and where does capital come from, and how can I get more of it? What's your experience and insights about getting capital, and whether you should bootstrap or raise capital? When's the right time? What's the right situation? It's a very generic question, but it'd be good to hear your take.
Yeah, it's funny. I often sort of encounter two types of founders. One that is they just want to bootstrap and hold on to everything and the IP, and they have this great belief and they probably have a great product, but you fall into the trap that the market will catch up and overtake you. If it is that it's a great idea, then somebody else will come across it, and that's really challenging to go too far down the journey. But then the other challenge, and early on, people are looking for money I've got a great idea. They're so positive, but there's been no validation or anything. And they just want to throw money to develop the tech to solve the solution. And again, another massive pitfall, because without testing and iteration, and that's something I'll often have a conversation with the early stage founders. It's like, is there any way that you can ideate and test and validate with the minimal amount of investment, rather than just throwing a load of money at it? Because you can throw a load of money at it, and in a year's time, the problem may have changed. It may not be the solution you were looking for. You may have put the money in the wrong place. So, look, I think
usually the answer to that question is, can you validate with less money? Usually the answer to that's yes, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's 100%, or at least parts of it. So focus on the parts that you can validate with little or no money. Look, the worry is it limits speed and scalability, but and the capital does accelerate growth, but it's all about the right time to knowing. I think you need to know your own business model. You need to have your clear goals, and you have to have a clear plan for that investment, what it's going to do to your business, when, and what are the outcomes, the expected outcomes, rather than just, I've got a great idea, I need to get it. I've heard people saying, I want money to get it to market, to test it. It's like, that's insane. It's like,
Not a thing, right?
no. So even if you can use whatever basic rudimentary ways of testing a hypothesis, that involves humans and spreadsheets and whatever, and get that feedback from the market, ideally. I think another trap people go into, try and digital validation. They'll put something out digitally, they'll try and look at the analytics and go, great, we've got a vertical. You need humans to feedback, actually speak to a consumer. And
that's an important point, right?
Yeah.
So many founders think that product-led growth, because that's the goal for a lot of founders, which makes total sense. The path to get there is like a straight line. Let's get the product online as soon as we can, and let's start collecting the analytics and start to drive that viral feedback loop. But as you say, you need that human engagement to understand and make sense of all the data that you're collecting. Like, why did someone churn? Like, you've got the data to say that someone did churn, but why did they churn? Maybe someone in the house got sick, or they lost their job, or you just don't know unless you're actually talking to the people behind the data.
I think it's that contingency planning as well. As you mentioned there, you get some initial flags, positive flags that it's validated, it's accelerating, and then you're suddenly blind. You're blinkered. You've got this tunnel vision, and everything else that is possible is ignored. And then suddenly you hit a roadblock, and then you might be a year or two down the track, and you can't reverse engineer. And the other vertical could have been 10 times, 1,000 times more productive than where you've ended up. So again, it's that trying to put the brake on, stop, step back, having a view, having a look at contingency, what could happen, what else is out there, and trying to know, what do I not know? again, it's the what do I not know, what do I need to know
Yeah, no, isn't it? I think there's a big challenge that we have in the startup ecosystem as well around just language. We don't really yet have a standardized language as an industry, and so I think that makes it particularly difficult. Like I love terms like founder-led sales, and that has a specific meaning, but it's not a universally adopted term. It's not a universally known term. And I've then extended that to founder-led marketing and founder-led product development, and because that concept really works across the business, and founders have to intuitively figure things out, and then turn it into systems that they can give to others to scale, which is really what founder-led selling is all about, and why so many hired professional salespeople fail is because they're not given the tools they need to succeed by the founder. But yeah, I find that language such a huge issue. Do you run into that as well?
Yeah, all the time. I think that founder-led everything is to actually get the intimate understanding of each area of the business before they hire someone. You mentioned sales. Again, we touched on that earlier. You can get a sales gun, but if they're not understanding the problem intimately and the customers, they need that passion and connection with the product, and the founder needs to realize these challenges, because then they'll be thrown out to market, and then the founder won't understand the challenges. So there's a complete breakdown of communication. So yeah, I think that's important. I think on another point on the investing as well is you've got to understand that with any capital that you raise wherever from, there is repercussions. There is something that you need to give back. So you need to manage that. It's if you go down the track, some founders are looking for 10x, 100x, 1000x in this time, and if you're not there and you take that money and you need a runway of 3 years to carry on with iteration development, it's going to break the business. They're gonna bleed it dry to try and just get their capital back. So really having a clear understanding, it's fair for the business and for the investors to know where the money's going to be spent and what that future looks like.
Yeah, 100%. And those different stages mean different decisions can be made around the capital, isn't it? And so knowing you need the capital to hire a professional salesperson, which is going to cost a lot more money. Knowing when the right time to raise capital is a big part of the capital strategy, isn't it? Then.
Yeah, I think so. I think the majority of people probably maybe push for a capital. Maybe I don't know. I just say majority. I keep thinking I split. Yeah, I was going to say some really just go too early and some go too late. It's really hard to find those that hit the sweet spot. But I think the reason again is the challenge of being a founder is it's overwhelming. You have so much to, again, get that space to have a look at the business, to plan and understand what is the right time. Is this the right time? Who do we need to invest and why? It takes so much time when you're trying to solve all these other problems over here and respond to customer needs and your potentially staff needs.
Yeah. And you may need to be aware as a founder that a lot of the investors that you're talking to have still got their oil plates on. That's something that I didn't appreciate early on in my entry into the startup space, is that investors are going through the same journey as founders are going through in a lot of cases. I think only 11% of funds are capable of raising a second fund. And that speaks volumes about how it's really hard to be an investor. Raising a first fund is that's a hard task as it is, but then actually running that successfully and then going on to turn it into a business and raise more funds, that's a whole nother challenge, right? So you need to be careful where you get your advice from.
Yeah, look, I think it's a bit like blind dates. You really need to start to understand it's not just about money as well. If you're talking about investors, it's what else they can bring to the business. Money is just one small part of it. It's the knowledge, the experience, the understanding of the value proposition and the problem you are solving. If they can understand that, they have experience in that, and they can bring support, whether it's access to other markets, whether it's marketing capabilities. There's so many other things that an investor or investment can bring to a business than just the dollars. I think founders just look at the money to solve this problem and forget everything else.
Yeah. I find there's sort of two sides to that coin. There's there's the mindset of I just need the money will solve everything. And there's the other mindset of once I've got an investor, they've got a magical, black book that's got connections to everybody I'm ever going to need. And they're just going to plug me into customers and more investors, and it's all just going to happen for me.
Yeah. That's right. I think that conversation has to happen, and to be sure that will happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, fascinating. And I don't know, have you seen this this new space called micro SaaS that's sort of starting to take hold, where because of vibe coding and the abilities of AI, founders can start to get more significant businesses going with less staff, and therefore that maybe changes the equation for bootstrapping versus raising. Do you have any insight into that space?
Oh, look, I think the whole space is changing rapidly. Just with the the AIs that are coming in. I think it's an amazing opportunity. I think it's gonna potentially give a huge boost for startups, because they can operate far more on a far more lean sort of model, because the AIs can do a lot of the heavy lifting. So I think that's a really important thing for founders to consider. You have all these business problems as you try to develop a business. You come across all this complexity and obstacles you hadn't thought of. But to really understand how AI can help, I think that's a huge opportunity. There's a lot of talk about AI and the way that it is displacing so many jobs um, worldwide. But in the startup space, it can actually start accelerating solutions, and it doesn't lose any. It doesn't sort of potentially have an effect on people's existing jobs. So yeah, I think microSaaS, there's all these different ways of engaging, or there's new business models coming out. It's going to be really interesting these next 5 years of how that evolves.
It really is. Yeah, the opportunity space is changing massively, isn't it?
Yeah.
We've talked a little bit about founders and the adversity that they face. I often say that it's a roller coaster. You can be ecstatically happy one moment, and then a few hours later, you can be in the dumps because an investor said no, or you've lost a customer, or an employee's moved on, or whatever's happened. Managing that emotional journey is really hard. Have you got any thoughts or stories that come out for founders that are sort of dealing with that?
Yeah, it's look, I mean, having experienced it myself, and you also, it's extreme. The roller coaster, the highs and the lows, the resilience. I'm in awe of all founders that are trying to get a business off the ground. And being able to work in Stony Chalk with 50, 55 different companies with multiple founders. It's amazing the resilience that they build. Resilience builds resilience. So
Mm.
that is one thing. Different founders, I find, have different techniques. I mean, one thing is to know that we are in a state of constant change and flux, and that's more apparent in a founder journey than anywhere else. So knowing that tomorrow is going to be different, and that there's always going to be opportunity, is important. I think the resilience is built because you get through each of these stages and you're still alive and you're still going, and that helps build your resilience and belief in yourself that you
Yeah,
can continue. Um,
I
Having
think
said that, I think, sorry.
I was just going to say that's such an important point. You can't sort of give that belief to someone externally, can you? They have to build that for themselves, as you say. It's that firsthand lived experience. That builds that
Yeah,
resilience.
it just builds and builds. But having said that, I do think there is a place for mental health, protecting oneself. I think founders are pretty poor at that. They do, there is incredible resilience and drive and optimism and belief, but they can take themselves almost to the edge,
Yeah,
and sometimes over the edge. And then that is that self-awareness. You need again, an external person can just say, look, you need to stop, because when you're in the weeds, you can't see how. It's just becomes too much. So to take a breath again, it's to have some space to talk to somebody, to go, I can't see the wood for the trees. I'm so overwhelmed, being
yeah,
vulnerable, and even just a conversation, just an hour conversation, to bring that level down, to have some strategies, to build a bit of space, to say, look, you've got to have the realization that you cannot do everything you're trying to do at the same time.
Yeah.
If you've got to a point, it's impossible. So what can you put aside? What can you drop? And what can you focus on? And just that simple process of going through that can
Yeah.
actually bring clarity quite quickly, and you can see the sort of tension drop. But it's
100%.
identifying, I think, is the challenge.
Yeah, and it's like taking a holiday. It's something I find incredibly hard is to say take time off, it's such a good reset. And I think universally, you listen to founders that say, somehow I managed to take a holiday and a break, and it was the best thing ever. But then you speak to them again, 2 years later, and they're like, "Have you taken a holiday yet?" Like, no. So you really need someone to sort of take care of your mental health that's outside of you, doesn't it? Because it's the balance of trying to drag this rock up the hill, which is your startup, and look after yourself is a difficult balance to hit.
Oh, it's really challenging. Society, I think, just generally has a problem with that, and founders, it's exacerbated just with the situation. But I think also the way you take a holiday is important. I think you need to allow yourself this holiday to literally disconnect. You need to unload all this baggage in your mind. It's no good trying to take a day off or a weekend off or a few days if you're just going to come back to work and all the problems are still there, because your stress levels are going to just go straight back up to red line. So you need that before holiday, a couple of days to prepare, to order, to let go, and be able to put that in a box and then reopen the box when you come back.
Yeah, 100%. That's so true. It's a bit like being in that sort of daily news cycle, isn't it? And getting out of that and go, what really matters versus what's in that daily news cycle.
Yeah, that's right. And then you go for a walk in nature, just literally disconnect. Yeah, there's other things to life.
Yeah, 100%. Let's switch to the other side of the coin. What are the traits that you see in founders who really thrive? We talked about a couple of those traits in terms of ability to take on board feedback. What else do you see in founders?
I think, feedback. I think, take on feedback is important externally, also internally. I think managing people can be quite difficult. I think different founders have different strengths. So being self-aware and understanding where your strengths lie, utilizing those, but understanding where the gaps are. And then if you've got that self-awareness, then you can rely on another strategy to fill those gaps. So it might be another person in the organization that can support that. Just being aware that this is a gap of mine and I'm going to have a challenge with this is important. So I've met some founders that again, 100%, 1,000%, we're going this way. It's all go. And then, I quite like challenging people. I mean, if it needs to be challenged, I won't do it. If I don't like challenging people, but I like the result. If it's a valid challenge, is probably a better way to say it. So if I see something that I feel
difficult for the sake of it.
Yeah, that's right. No, that's right. I mean, I don't just like to make my life difficult, but if there is a challenge that needs to be addressed and there's a way you can constructively address it, and then some founders I've seen will just, as I said, stop and take it on board and adjust and adapt, and that's amazing to see. It's like, you've got a trait that, although it's all push, which is what you need, you're willing to be stopped and listen, and so that's part of vulnerability. It's also agility, that the flexibility of a founder that can. And again, back to that resilience piece, that hits an obstacle, is able to step back and then pivot, to know when to pivot, and have the tools to be able to workshop what the problem is and how to navigate it is key. And that again involves bringing other people in, working that out and pivoting. And then the next thing that comes is often bigger and better. Those ones that succeed address the challenge. They don't try and push through it. They don't keep forcing with just a belief. They can see it's a challenge. They may not know the answers, but they have to work through that, and then they overcome it. And there's a really big upside to that.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, there's a bit to unpack there that's worth sort of reinforcing, and that is that having people around you that have got different personality traits. I think that's and being comfortable with that, and I think, as you said, the not hiring the people that are the same as you because it feels comfortable, hiring people that are very different from you to complement your strengths. That's something universally that we see that really makes a massive difference. if you can work with a co-founder or key employee that has that, if you don't kill each other, things are going to be great. And I think that's that's one of the challenges, is that diversity of personality type it naturally creates conflict.
Yes.
You've just got to be comfortable with that, and you've got to you got to be able to have a way of working through that, right?
Yeah, that is challenging. That is challenging. Yeah, absolutely. But then it's all based on trust. It's based on trust and acceptance. And I with one of my co-founders of a business, it wasn't a tech startup, but we almost got to blows. We literally
Right.
we it was we were so stressed, and we just snapped, and others had to get in between us. But in the end, there was that trust and that love and that respect for each other that we worked through it and laughed about
that
it.
values foundation gives you a common ground when you've got a disagreement, doesn't it?
That's it, exactly, 100%.
Yeah. That's brilliant. And what else was I going to say? So there's that diversity of personality type. I forget what else I was going to say. So let's keep moving. So we've talked about founders that thrive. Let's talk a little about the culture. We're sort of started to move into this area of culture. What is it about culture that makes it such a critical part of startup building? We talk a lot about culture in large organizations, but in some organizations it seems to matter less. Why does it seem to be so important in the startup world?
Yeah, look, a culture, it's something I'm very passionate about, trying to develop positive culture, trying to reduce toxicity, because it's infectious, and it's not necessarily anybody's fault, because people are there trying to do their best. But it's amazing how it can spiral out quite quickly through no
Yeah.
one's fault and through everybody passionately trying to do the best. So culture is so key, and there's some key sort of points in an organizational's growth where culture is challenged. So I think, early on, culture in a startup, what you have with a startup, and you get the right people on board that join the startup, you have highly passionate people that are bought into the solution that you're trying, the problem you're trying to solve. And they will go above and beyond to support a founder. One thing with cultures, once you get those first hires, is it's important to remember that it can become an abuse of that passion, and people will work and work so much, 10, 20, 30% beyond what is realistically should be expected of them.
Yeah.
But they just do for no extra money. Often there's not the salary, there's just the passion and belief.
Yeah.
And often in company, those original people that were within the company fall away, and it's another sort of gamut of sort of people that are hired that then take the company further, which is crushing for those that have sacrificed so much for a
Yeah.
vision that wasn't necessarily theirs. So it's really important, I think, for founders to look at their own mental health and look at the pressure, but then look at how that is affecting colleagues and others within the business, and just remember your core values and who you are, and if you're burning other people, if you're burning out and burning others out, then something has to change.
Yeah. 100%. I remember a quote. I can't remember who it was from, but it went something along the lines of, as a company, as a startup, you're going to get a culture whether you like it or not. If you design it yourself, you might get the culture that you want. If you don't design it yourself, you'll end up with a culture that you may not like.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. And it's to build it from the beginning. Again, it's an opportunity. It's something that needs to be focused, and you can do it as a founder. You don't need to get HR and pay money in early, but you just have to have some fundamental core values that you keep reflecting on. And again, I keep speaking about this space. Every quarter, step back. Are you still aligned to your values? Has there any been, people being pushed or yourself beyond, or are you doing things that don't align with your values and your mission? And build that culture, instill that culture in others, and then be vulnerable. Allow others to come to you and say, "Look, this is what you've instilled in me, but you're no longer operating within that framework." And then
Yeah.
that'll often be a light bulb moment. They don't mean to; they're
Yeah.
just trying to get something done because the customer needs it. And if we don't do this, this won't happen. And it has
Yeah.
to be
Exactly.
okay. So yeah, it's an interesting thing to
It's another
build.
one of these areas. another one of these areas in startups, which I think we need the term, founder-led culture. The same as with founder-led sales, is the idea is the founder figures out how to do sales, turns it into a system that they can teach someone else, and then bring someone else and teach them that system. It's the same with culture. You need to, because a lot of founders intuitively have a great startup culture that they intuitively get. But if you don't take that step of turning it into a system that you can teach others, it'll never scale, and it won't grow. And that's where I often see things fall apart, is founders doing everything right, but it's the people that they hire in that don't conform to their view of culture.
That's right, and I think it's understanding, it's having feedback from those that you hire, because you're sucked up. Your view is on the vision. You feel that everybody's following you, and then one person might be just really feeling it, really suffering. And if there's not that open channel of communication and check-in, you won't get that. You need to keep checking in to understand if it's working.
Yeah, 100%. And never forget, I watched a commencement speech delivered by Jeff Bezos. I think it might have been at Princeton. And the theme of the speech was, it's easier to be right than it is to be kind. And I think as a company leader, that is such a powerful understanding that needs to be embedded in culture.
Yeah.
So I've worked for some pretty horrible cultures, which are very performance driven. They get results, but they burn a lot of people along the way.
Likewise, yeah, it's horrible to see that. You just see this churn, and they just keep going. But if you build good culture and have belief, it's amazing. The really successful companies can scale. I think those that have bad culture, they can make enough money, they can grow, but it's not 10x, 100x, 1000x. They just have this churn, and there's no blue sky with those companies. It stagnates.
Yeah, 100%. Let's move on and talk a little bit about habits of actually. I'm not going to go here. I'm going to go straight to talk about because we're low on time. So I'm going to I want to get to Stone and Chalk, because Stone and Chalk is such a great community, and one of the things that we haven't talked a lot about today is peer support, and how being able to talk to someone else that's going through the same journey at the similar time. I mean, it's great to talk to a very experienced coach or advisor that's got more experience than you, but sometimes you need to talk to someone that's going through the same thing at the same time and is at the same level of experience, don't you? Tell us a little bit about the Stone and Chalk community and ecosystem, and how founders are finding that valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, Stone and Chalk, I think part of the sort of secret sauce is that community, and part of my role is to try and build community. There's two things, we try and provide opportunities to build community, but it's also the founders themselves also need to put themselves out there. Sometimes it's not a comfortable place. A founder may be very technical, not maybe a people person, maybe pressured by the challenges that are running a startup. But to try and get out there and actually be part of a community, to network, just have opportunities to have conversations. It's amazing to see light bulb moments or new opportunities that are unearthed just by a conversation over a pint or over a lunch. It's amazing. I take some founders out for lunches quite regularly, just to try and connect them, and it's amazing. I've had founders say, "Oh, you sit just over the desk," and I've for a year we've been working in the same floor and we haven't spoken. What do you do?
Yeah.
And then after the lunch, they're off talking about how they can actually help each other, and where there may be some synergies. So connection I think is the key in an ecosystem, and a community, and then reaching out to say, look, I have this problem. Who might be able to help me with this problem? Within Stone and Chalk, that's an email to me. How might I be able to connect? Who's out there? And I'm often sending emails. I've sort of got a repository of people and different skills and opportunities. And when I sort of have a problem, then I can say, oh, there's this person, talk to this person. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
So I think community and talking. It's funny how founders will often come, even early stage ones, and they're quite cagey about IP and what they've got, and they've often asked me advice. How much should I talk about my business and solution? And I'm like, man, running a startup is so hard. I was like, for somebody to actually get to where you are, that's massive. They're not
Yeah.
going to do that, especially if they're another founder in another startup. They're not going to drop everything and go through that journey to get to where you are. So
Yeah.
you can be pretty open about what you've got. And that's where the opportunities lie, I think. Being open, conversation, asking what the problems are, and even in workshops we hold, it's amazing. You have a workshop about a specific problem or topic and a topic expert, but then when the founders get to talk to each other within that environment, and the workshop leader is able to help them connect and bring out their own specific challenges that they've faced and maybe overcome. It's amazing how many solutions can actually come from the founders themselves, founder to founder, rather than the
Yeah.
topic expert.
Yeah.
So I think communication is key in networking and being part of a community.
Yeah, 100%. So who's, if people are looking for a community to join, who's the right kind of founder that fits into the Stone and Chalk
Yeah, so
network?
Stone and Chalk. So we are, nationally, we are the largest startup tech hub in Australia. We've been around for 10 years. But we are focused just on tech. So in South Australia, we're very fortunate to have government support and highly subsidized offering. You want to be a tech startup with a unique solution to a problem that you built your tech around. We take startups when they are post MVP or very close to getting paying customers, and then we wrap around the business smarts to help them scale and grow. That's our piece in the ecosystem. We keep it as that niche so we can have most impact to those founders that are at that point in the journey. To connect is to go online and just really submit an application for a membership, and that'll ping me, and we'll set up a discovery call, and we can really just understand where the founder's at, and where they're heading, and how we might be able to support. And if it's not Stone and Chalk, there are other nodes in the ecosystem. It's a thriving ecosystem here in South Australia. I think there's like 22 individual sort of offerings, all the way from early to late, and government support as well. So reach out and ask the question, I think.
Yeah, fabulous. Excellent. Well, we're reaching the end of our time. It's been an absolute pleasure to chat. You've got a fountain of experience and knowledge, and it's great to have you in the ecosystem here and Stone and Chalk. It's been a delight to chat. I hope founders have got a lot of value out of that. If they want to connect with you personally, you've got your own coaching
Yep.
service. There's a QR code on the left there. And of course, if you're interested in chatting with you in your capacity at Stone and Chalk, there's a QR code on the right there. Can you just talk about your coaching? Who's an ideal candidate founder, someone that you normally work with?
Yeah, look, different. I work with different founders. Sometimes it may not be specifically around the criteria that Stone and Chalk meet, but they still have a business that they're trying with a solution they're trying to solve. Early stage founders, I try to connect with people before they make some big decisions that is going to be a major impact to them, financially or emotionally, or impact on others. So I really like the space between where money gets involved, where people are involved, and where those decisions, where founders are overwhelmed and can't see clarity, and really try to help them analyze their situation and build a sort of roadmap to success. It comes from them. It's got to come from someone that is open to being under the microscope, open to someone that can ask difficult questions and put them out of their comfort zone, so that we can unearth the challenges and the potential opportunities that there are.
Fabulous. All right. Well, thanks so much, Alex. I really appreciate your time. Of course, if any founders listening to this are looking for more clarity on how to get to product market fit, and want to know exactly how to spend their time and capital more effectively, at Leapship, we have a fabulous service called a Startup Builder Strategy Session. It's 2 hours of your time, and we guarantee that it will be the best 2 hours that you ever spend as a founder, or we'll give you your money back. If you'd like to book one of those sessions, there's a QR code at the top there to book one of those sessions. If you're not sure if you're ready for that, of course, you can just book a time and have a chat and see whether that might be the right thing for you. So it's been an absolute pleasure. today. Next session we've got coming up, which is on the 2nd of May. We've got Shashank Agarwal from API Market. Shashank has an amazing background in senior roles in Amazon and Expedia, a machine learning expert, and he has built a fabulous business, this API Marketplace. And I'm really looking forward to talk to him. If you want to get notified about the details for registration, there's a QR code on the screen there. And if you've got a question that you want to submit early, so we can get that into the show, please do so. So this is the Leap Sheep Startup Builder podcast. Thanks so much again, Alex, and